Our plan for Christian parenting is to use technology. AD, artificial discipleship. When we put the children down, we say, Siri, disciple our children. And all night long, they hear the entire Bible, major Christian doctrines, and hundreds of Christian devotionals in German. That gives us more time to binge. So what is the plan for Christian parenting? That's our topic at today's Family Practice. Hi, Ben Burns with Family Trainers, where we get your teenagers to speak in complete sentences. You know, that's actually impossible. We can't do that. But we can help you build more closeness, cooperation, and Christian influence in your family. Last week, we looked at the goal of Christian parenting. This week, we want to look at the plan for Christian parenting. But before we start our training, let's think about why it's important to have a plan. When our kids were little, we took them to Disneyland. Now, our friends who had gone before us said, you better have a plan. Now, this was the time before smartphones, but there was a computer program called RideMax, and it was really cool. You would put in when you want to get into the park, when you want to leave the park, and list all the rides you want to see, and it would spit out this crazy organized plan. It even told you when Mickey would be on his smoke break.
Goofy, these kids have been driving me nuts. But at least I get to go home in an hour. Ha 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 ha.
Gee, Mickey, that's not a very nice thing to say.
Having a plan made visiting Disneyland so much easier. And I think the same is true for parenting. You see, without a plan, we're just reacting to our kids all day long, and that's exhausting. But having a plan helps us feel like we know what we're doing. So what is the plan for Christian parenting? Let's get started. I think a plan for Christian parenting can be found in the home life of Timothy. Do you remember Timothy? He was a disciple of the Apostle Paul. Paul was training him how to be a leader in the church and how to train other men to be a leader in the church, and he actually had a very, very close relationship with Timothy. Paul wrote 2 letters to Timothy, and in his second letter, he pours out his heart to Timothy. It was probably one of his most personal letters of all that he had written in the New Testament. And in that letter, he reminds Timothy of his upbringing in his home about his faith. For I am mindful of the sincere faith within you, which first dwelled in your grandmother Lois and your mother Eunice, and I am sure that it is in you as well. You, however, continue in the things you have learned and become convinced of, knowing from whom you have learned them, and that from childhood you have known the sacred writings, which are able to give you the wisdom that leads to salvation through faith, which is in Christ Jesus. You see, Timothy's mother and grandmother had a sincere faith, and they modeled that to Timothy. They taught him the sacred scriptures, and Timothy experienced through his relationship with them what faith looked like and what faith felt like. He learned it early on as a kid, but later in his life he became personally convinced. And that's our hope and prayer for our kids, is that as we teach and model the scriptures to them and what it looks like to have a Christian faith, that at some point they become personally convinced. They have to choose for themselves whether or not they will follow Christ. Both Timothy's mother and grandmother had a strong relationship with God and Timothy. So let me suggest this as a plan for Christian parenting. Walk with our God and walk with our kids. Let's take a closer look at those 2 big ideas. The first part of our plan is to walk with our God. When it comes to our walk with God, the most critical factor is that we have a sincere faith, like Timothy's mother and grandmother. But what does that mean? Let's start by looking at what it's not. The word sincere literally means without hypocrisy. So, sincere faith is not being a hypocrite. And what's a hypocrite? Well, it's someone who says one thing or believes one thing, but does something entirely different. The word hypocrite is actually used of actors, people who get on a stage, people who perform, people pretend to be somebody that they're not. When Jesus was ministering, there was one group of people he ran into that he called hypocrites, and that's the Pharisees. Listen to how he describes them. But do not do what they do, for they do not practice what they preach. There's 5 ways they demonstrated their hypocrisy. First, they were dutiful. Jesus said, Isaiah was right when he prophesied about you. These people honor me with their lips, but their hearts are far from me. The Pharisees were motivated by obligation, not out of a sincere love or desire to honor God. They made faith all about religious performance. Second, they were attention-seeking. Jesus said, "And they do all their deeds to be noticed by other people." They were more concerned about getting other people to notice them and respect them for their behavior rather than having a sincere desire to serve God. They made faith all about impressing people. Third, they were legalistic. Jesus said, and the scribes asked him, "Why do your disciples not walk according to the tradition of the elders, but eat their bread with impure hands?" The Pharisees were concerned about traditions, not about the Scriptures. They made rules around the Scriptures, but treated those rules as Scriptures. They had made faith all about rules. Fourth, they were self-righteous. Listen to this parable Jesus tells about a Pharisee. The Pharisee stood and was praying this to himself. "God, I thank you that I am not like other people, swindlers, unjust, adulterers, or even like this tax collector. I fast twice a week. I pay tithes of all that I get." The Pharisees believed that they had arrived. They had believed that they were morally and religiously superior to other people. They believed that faith was about perfection. And number 5, they were judgmental. Jesus said, the scribes and the Pharisees were watching him closely to see if he healed on the Sabbath, so that they might find reason to accuse him. Because they thought they were perfect, the Pharisees spent a lot of time evaluating people's morals, behaviors, and whether or not they were keeping their rules. They made faith all about looking down on others. Because of their hypocrisy, the Pharisees made faith in God really unattractive. Now, I don't know what you were thinking about when I was reading through that list, but what I was thinking was, me. I'm guilty of every one of those things that the Pharisees did. And you know what? So are you. Do you know why? Because you're not a perfect Christian parent. And I'm not a perfect Christian parent, because there are none, remember? But what we want to be careful of is to not have a hypocritical faith. And if our kids see us as hypocrites in our home, then they're not going to be attracted to that kind of faith. If anything, they're going to rebel against that kind of faith. That's why we need to trust God to keep learning and growing in what does it look like to have a sincere faith. As I said, the word sincere means without hypocrisy. Another way to think of it is to be genuine. In other words, we really mean what we say, that we really do what we believe. This doesn't mean that we're perfect, but it means that over time, our kids see that we really believe, that we are the real deal, that even with all our imperfections, we keep returning to Christ and growing in our faith. Paul told Timothy to be that kind of genuine Christian. Listen to what he said. "Let no one look down on your youthfulness, but rather in speech, conduct, love, faith, and purity, show yourself an example of those who believe." As parents, over time and with God's help, we need to keep striving to be good examples of sincere faith. What does that look like? Here are some ideas. Genuine humility. We accept God's view of ourselves, that we are sinners, but we are saved by grace. There's nothing we've done to earn our salvation. Genuine love. We appreciate and pursue God for all the wonderful gifts He's given us, our life, breath, salvation, our family, and friends. Genuine trust. We take God at His word, and we believe that He's going to take care of us. Genuine respect. We choose to live according to God's morals and His perspectives versus our own. Genuine example. We imitate Christ's love, patience, acceptance, compassion, forgiveness, and integrity. When we think about those genuine characteristics, I think every one of us wants to be that kind of Christian, and we want our kids to be that kind of Christian as well. That's why it's so important for us as parents to understand, develop, and model a sincere faith to our kids. I think this is best summarized in Walt Henrichsen's book, How to Disciple Your Children. Walt was a personal mentor to me and a genuine example of sincere faith. Walt said, "Discipling our children is more than dogma and programs. Most importantly, It is a quality of life absorbed by our children from us who are parents. The example we set makes or breaks everything else we do. If there is something attractive about the way we live, then our children will become infected with a desire to emulate it. We are the principal influences in the lives of these would-be disciples of Jesus Christ. This is the challenge of Christian parenthood. The second part of our plan is to walk with our kids. Timothy's faith was influenced through his relationship with his mother and grandmother. He not only heard them talk about their faith, he experienced it. Remember, parenting is discipleship, and discipleship is relationship. And our faith is often more caught than taught. The greater connection we have with our kids, the greater influence we can have for Christ. And our kids feel connected to us primarily by how we treat them. And how we treat them says a lot about how we're doing in our walk with God. So here are some simple ways we can connect with our kids. Listening to them, empathizing with them, apologizing to them, encouraging them, laughing with them, hugging them, touching them, playing with them, cooperating with them, and telling them we love them. When we treat our kids the way we want to be treated, then we feel connected and our relationship is good. But when we're disconnected from our kids, our influence suffers. We cannot have a positive influence if we have a negative connection with our kids. And our kids feel disconnected from us primarily by the way we treat them. And here's some things we can do as parents that disconnect us from our kids. Yelling at them, criticizing them, judging them, shaming them, comparing them with others, neglecting them, nagging them, threatening them, lecturing them, and withdrawing from them. When we treat our kids the way we don't want to be treated, we feel disconnected and our relationship is hard. I know that's true in my relationship with my wife. If I treated her in any of these ways, I'd be sleeping with the dog. Isn't it true that when our relationships are good, life is good, especially in our homes? When we walk with our kids and build good, connected relationships with them, our home life is awesome. It's magnifique. The Bible calls that unity. And unity is really important to God. It's the one thing that Jesus prayed for the church, that we would be unified after he left. The reason unity is so important to God is that God himself is unity. He is Father, Son, and Holy Spirit who dwells in perfect harmony. And he wants the church to be unified. And it starts in the home. Unity between husband and wife, unity between parents and children, and unity between brothers and sisters. As parents, if we learn to minimize over time the things that hurt our unity and maximize the things that build our unity, we're going to have the good relationships we want to have with our kids. Well, that's the plan for Christian parenting. Walk with our God and walk with our kids. And the more we do that, the more God will help us to nurture and guide each individual child. The real power of the Bible's plan for discipleship lies in the strength of the relationship. And that's why I call this approach relational parenting. When a child comes into contact with a parent who genuinely loves the Lord and genuinely loves them, someone who not only discusses the gospel with them, but demonstrates the gospel to them in how they treat them, the impact is profound. Now, I hope I didn't make this plan sound easy, because believe me, it's not. It's going to take a lot of time and effort and failure and frustration, and it's going to take a lot of help from God and from others. But if we persevere, by God's grace, we'll help our kids to follow Christ and flourish as God's image when they leave our homes. All right, that wraps up our training time. Now let's get to your workout. This is your time to invest in your parenting skills. I want you to take the next 10 to 15 minutes to work on 3 things. First, reflect. Take a few minutes and think about what you heard in our training. Where do you agree? Where do you disagree? Second, apply. Take another few minutes to think about what stood out to you in our training that you want to start applying to your current parenting situation. Third, pray. Spend the last few minutes thanking God for your kids and your role as a parent and asking Him for specific help in your situation. That's it for today's family practice. If you'd like a handout of today's training and a guided workout plan, then look for the link in the notes section below. If this parenting workout has been helpful to you, hit the share button and send it to a friend. If you'd like to see more of these workouts, then hit the subscribe button. At Next Practice, we're going to start looking at 9 foundational faith perspectives that help us as parents to walk with our God and develop a sincere faith that we model to our kids. Well, until next time, remember, to get the family you want takes practice. All right, bring it in. Farrell, Richardson, get over here. Family on 3. 1, 2, 3, family.